Okay, that's great. So, as I say, the session is developing your scholarly profile. If you want to go to the next. So I suppose the first question you're going to ask is, why do you need to work on your scholarly profile? And your scholarly online profile is basically a combination of your academic activity and your presence online. So it's how to kind of make sure that you're visible online, that people can find your work, they know who you are, and that you have all your kind of papers lined up under that one identity. And so when you create and maintain your online academic profile, it'll help the academic community and beyond connect with and cite your work, which is the main thing. You want people to see your work and you want them to be able to cite your papers. It's going to increase the ability to track and measure impact across multiple platforms. So you'll want to keep an eye on which of your papers are up on the different systems to maximize, because ideally what you want is people seeing as many of your papers as possible, and preferably in the one location, so it's a nice seamless experience for them. And it's going to ensure your work and its impact is correctly connected and traceable to you. So you want that acknowledgement, whether I say the scholarly papers, or other resources that you've produced, and help you be found by new collaborators and sources of funding. So you want other academics in Maynooth and elsewhere to be able to find your work, decide that you might be a good research partner going forward. And also for sources of funding, you want to be, when you're applying for funding, be able to show your track record that, and it may be even, the impact of previous funding. You got previous funding, you wrote some papers, and then you want to be able to show your impact. Thanks, Heidi. Next one. So in an ideal world, you would have all of your, I suppose, information under the one profile, but that isn't quite there yet. So there's a few things you just need to watch out for. So the first thing I was mentioned there is author and affiliation disambiguation. So fine, big word, but the basic idea is there may be variations on your name. So you may be up in a system with your ordinary name, your double borrowed name, your married name, your not married name. You may have put your name up with initials, hyphenations, all that kind of thing. But the ideal is, what you want to do is when you publish is have the same consistent author identity throughout all your papers. Okay, so that's important. So that means then when a database is trying to collate your work, they'll be able to pull them together in a seamless fashion. And you'll find that with your institutional affiliation as well. So we would be called Maynooth University. So it's not going to be NUI Maynooth, NUIM, or any of those kind of variations. You're going to be emphasizing when you put in your affiliation, the Maynooth University bit, not so much your department, your research institute, all that kind of thing. Okay, so just be aware of that, because that all affects then how you're searched for and how your papers appear. There's your risk profile in Maynooth. So that's the risk system. That's what produces your little kind of bio when people look you up in Maynooth. Your details, what you do, what your publications are, educational stuff, all that kind of thing is in there. And we also have the Mural Open Institutional Repository, which is important to get your work up as well. And those two can kind of work together a bit. So if you have your risk profile, you attach the PDFs of your papers, they'll be kind of pushed towards the institutional repository then as well. But they're both great ways of making you and your work as visible as possible, so people can actually find your papers and make use of them. To say the institutional repository as well, you would have to check copyright on that if you're putting your paper up full text, but that's something the library can help you with as well. Then there's the ORCID ID, which I'll get onto, and what ORCID does is it gives you a unique identifier, and this is a profile you can maintain yourself. So you set up your ORCID account, and then you can put your papers into it. You can also put in funding you've got, your career to date, your education, all that kind of stuff, and then you decide what to show, what you want. But the great thing is you control it, so you could have all your papers up there. You're not worrying about it. A certain database only showing a few of your papers. ORCID will have all of them if you kind of monitor it. So that's ORCID, and you can import into ORCID from other databases, which I will show you in a second now. The next one you might be aware of is the Researcher ID, and that's in the Web of Science database. So Web of Science is a big bibliographic database in the US. It used to be Thomson Reuters. It's now owned by Clarivat. And the way it works is that you register with them, and they'll set you up a researcher profile, which will have details like obviously your name, your publications to date, and then it'll give you certain metrics based on that. Your scholarly output, your H-index, citations, all that kind of thing. Then, and that used to feed actually a thing called Insights, which used to go into the university rankings. It doesn't anymore. Currently now they're using data from another one called Scopus, which is from Elsevier, based in Europe, And they will automatically give you a Scopus author identifier once you have one or more papers up there. Okay, and you can use that then in your correspondence, for example, or applying for funding. You put in your Scopus or your researcher ID, people can click on that and get straight to your papers. Okay. Both of those will import into ORCID. Okay, so you can add your papers in there. I should say this, but you can't add papers to Web of Science or Scopus. Okay, they're working off their own data set. So you can point out papers that they've missed from journals they index, but you can't actually just ask them to add a paper up. It has to go through their review process, quality control. They only index certain journals, so that's kind of how they operate. Then you've Google Scholar citations. So Google Scholar pulls in data from obviously Google Scholar, and that can be quite good profile as well. So you'll kind of use your Gmail, go into your Google Scholar citations profile, and you can pull in then your papers there, and it'll give you again another outline list of your papers, your output, your H index, and so on. Okay, Google Scholar tends to be a bit more generous in that they're not as rigorous in what they include. So they'll troll the web and they'll pull in a lot of scholarly work, book chapters, conference proceedings, all sorts of things. So that can probably be the most flattering profile that you'll have. But of course, the downside of that is it wouldn't be as rigorous. The quality wouldn't be as good. So, while you can use it to kind of visualize the work you've done, it wouldn't be as reliable maybe as Researcher ID or the Scopus ID. And then finally, there's the academic social networks. So that's things like academia.edu, ResearchGate, Social Science Research Network, Mendeley. Useful, and the idea of those is they allow academics to speak to each other, exchange papers, pose questions, all that kind of thing. But they're not open access, so if you're looking at those as an alternative to maybe Mural, it doesn't really work like that. And in fact, people can be asked to take papers down if they're not compliant with the copyright. So just be careful around that. Okay. And the other thing with those, they are SSRN and Mendeley are both owned by Elsevier. So, this might be an issue there for you as well. Okay, so that's their basic identities. Okay, so sorry, how do you get to the next? Okay, this is just an example now of the affiliations. Okay, so for example, this is in Scopus, so you'd watch out for different variations, university variations, and then author variations. And they're quite good at picking these up. We can do kind of little projects with them and kind of clean up the affiliation and the author details. So, if you have any issues around that, let us know. There's also a tool in Scopus. You can actually merge your IDs. So if you can see that you're up a couple of times, you have a couple of separate profiles, but it's you can merge the two of them together. You can also flag if maybe, papers are included that aren't yours. You can let them know and they'll remove them. So, it's a way of just housekeeping your profile in Scopus. Hey, Heidi, can the next one? Okay, this is just an example of the research information system that you're all familiar with. And so that's your biography, your research, your publications, professional details, and so on. Okay, keep going. And this is Mural. So that's the Maynooth University Research Archive. So great place to, get an accurate reflection of your work and also showcase all your papers. And everything up there is going to be open access, accessible to anybody in the world. So great way of getting information out there and sharing it around. And great place as well that they can actually track as well. You can show the number of downloads you're getting. So you can actually go into Mural and show the number of downloads. And again, use that maybe if you're making a case for interaction with your work other than just citations. You can show there's an interest in your papers. Okay, next. This is just an example of what it looks like in there. So you can go in by author, academic unit, whatever way you want to look at it. I should say as well, all the PhDs and research masters are in there as well. And it doesn't have to be just the peer-reviewed journal articles that you put in there. You could also put in maybe newspaper articles you've done, conferences, technical papers, more professional papers you've done. So, it's a good way of just getting access up there to all the work you've done. Again, depending on what department you're in, there can be a huge variation in the kind of material you produce. So some departments, it could be all focused on the peer-reviewed scholarly papers. Other ones, maybe not so much. There could be different types of content you're producing that you might want to showcase to people. And in turn, wouldn't necessarily be in Scopus or Web of Science. Okay. Okay, and this is just Open Door, which is a kind of a repository of repositories, if you like. So while Mural is great, in a sense, it's the Maynooth archive, so you know it's going to be curated well, you know it's going to be preserved. There might be other more, subject-based repositories you want to put your papers into, and Open Door is finding those, great for finding those. So you can go in and just search by subject area or by country, and deposit your papers into different archives. Also great, of course, as a research resource. You can go in and find open access papers from around the world in there as well. Okay, next one. So just open access, open science generally. If that's an area you are interested in, making more of your papers open access. And as you know, like when you publish these days, there is often a requirement there to publish open access. So if you want any advice on that, you can contact the library. And I also have this guide that brings you through a lot of the issues around that. Okay, so next one. And these are just some of the agreements that are going to help you with that. So there's a number of agreements with publishers negotiated by IRL, the Irish Research E-Library. And these are just some of the current ones that are there with different publishers. And you can go in there and it gives you a full listing of the journals that are included in the deals. And if you are using that, just bear in mind, they do tend to run out towards the end of the year. So just keep an eye on that, that the quota hasn't run out, because you can't do it retrospectively. So it's worth sometimes timing your publications maybe slightly earlier in the year, so you have a better chance of being included under those deals. So with those, they'll just waive the article processing charge. So you'll be able to make your paper available open access without any cost implications. Okay, next one. ORCID I mentioned. So ORCID is a not-for-profit. You go in, you register with ORCID, and you can do it individually. There's also a Maynooth subscription to ORCID, so they can analyze things at a more institutional level. But the idea is you'll register with them. They'll give you an ORCID ID number, and then once you've registered, you can start to import your articles into ORCID. Okay, you can also import your, personal details, your employment record, funding, educational record, all that kind of thing, and then you decide what you want to be visible and what you don't. So more typically, you could just have for the general public, they would just get access to your publications, for example. So then when you're applying for something, you just attach your ORCID ID to your application, or you could have it under your email signature. Lots of different ways of just promoting your work, and it's a collection of your papers that you're actually curating. So you add in material in there, and as I said, you can do it. You can kind of synchronize it up with Web of Science or Scopus, but there's a variety of other databases you can pull in papers from as well. Okay, and I say it's that one place that you control it, and you can have all your publications in there. Okay, which is great. Whereas, as mentioned with Scopus and Web of Science, it doesn't necessarily include everything you have. It just includes what they're actually indexing. Okay, that's it. Next one. And that's just what it looks like. Okay, so you can see up there, there's your ORCID ID number, and there is, in that case, employment. But if you scroll down on that, you see all the different sections as well, and then you just decide, what people want to see and what not. Okay, next one. Now this is Web of Science, and with this, what you can do is just register with them, and then they'll issue you a researcher ID. Okay. Okay, next. So there's an example now of a profile in Web of Science. So this is Valerie Hefferdan's. There's a researcher ID number is in there, which you can see. Just at the top, down below her name, you see a box there, identifiers, Web of Science researcher ID, and there's her number. There's her name. And then off to the right-hand side, you'll see a lot of her metrics, like her H index. If H index, if you're not familiar, it's like an average. So it means she's at least 2 papers that have been cited twice. She's got 9 publications in there. And actually shows the difficulties if you're in the humanities. She would have an awful lot more publications than that, but just because of the nature of Web of Science, they're not indexing a lot of material. So it's always a challenge to try and, promote your work if you're in the humanities. That's where, of course, like using things like ORCID is great, Google citations, and just generally, putting the good narratives out about your work to promote yourself. Okay, next. This is Scopus. Now, in Scopus, they automatically assign you an author ID. And you can see that again under the name. There's Maynooth, and then beside it, SC, and there's the number. And I see ORCID is attached to that as well. So in her case, she has actually lined her ORCID up with her Scopus. So she's able to import all her Scopus material into ORCID. And again, there's her profile, her topics, her H index, number of documents, number of citations, all that kind of thing. Okay, next one. This is in Google Scholar Citations. Okay, and again, with this one, as I mentioned, you register with them, you add in your publications, and then you have a nice little profile. And again, you can see with them, you don't get an ID number as such, but you will get that nice little profile off to the side, you know, your citations, your H index, all that kind of thing. As I mentioned, because it's Google Scholar, it's kind of more generous in what it includes. Okay, so yeah, she'd have quite a few more papers in there. Okay, so as opposed to say Web of Science or Scopus. So that could be a good choice for her. And again, that'd be great when you're going for funding or promotions. You can just, you know, supply that graphic and show kind of where you're at. Okay, so next one. And this is ResearchGate. So this is one of the kind of academic networks I mentioned. Again, the idea is you register with this and you can go in and you can, you know, talk to other academics, you can share your papers and so on. Also quite useful sometimes for picking up additional citations from maybe journals that aren't indexed in Web of Science and Scopus. So they can be quite good that way. And the same would go for academia.edu or SSRN or whatever one you decide to use. But definitely good from an academic networking point of view. Other ones like Mendeley, they're also reference management tools. So there's a lot of kind of additional functionality in these. Okay, I should say with this as well, actually, the ResearchGate tends to be more the sciences and academia.edu tends to be more humanities. Social Science Research Network, you know, as the title suggests, more social sciences. So you will find equivalents of these that will kind of relate to the subject area that you're interested in. Okay, next one. And there's ResearchGate again, where it looks like. And again, you can see there, they're tracking citations and H index for her as well. And getting a metric there for her research interest score, so how much interest in the work. Okay, that's great. Next one. Okay, I say other ones, SSRN, academia.edu. LinkedIn is quite popular as well. That would have been more traditionally used, I suppose, as an employment tool, you know, for people kind of, you know, looking for jobs and that kind of thing. But now it seems to be expanded considerably, and you'll see a lot of people sharing more professional kind of stuff, you know, papers they've published, that kind of thing. So that seems to be growing. So that could be one worth keeping an eye on as well. So next one. Okay, so it's generally the research visibility then. So you have your profiles curated and kept up to date. So you're kind of conscious that there's your Scopus in Web of Science and the profile in Web of Science and Scopus are kind of important. You want to keep an eye on those. Google Scholar as well. ORCID, great for, you know, getting your visibility out there. So just keep on top of the risk definitely as well. It seems like a lot, but at least with Web of Science and Scopus, you can import those directly into ORCID, so you're not typing stuff in manually. And similarly, there's a lot of pluses to risk because that will, you know, feed into Mural, the institution repository. So it is worth keeping on top of these, if at all possible. But the general visibility bit then, so how do you increase your visibility to make sure you are getting more impact? So where you publish is important. So you want to be choosing the high impact journals, and Scopus and Web of Science will allow you to do that. Beware of the predatory journals. So they're the ones that usually approach you, usually send you an email and ask, do you want to publish with them? They'll probably publish quite quickly for you. There'll be a fee, but just be careful that they are those quality journals. And there's various tools which I'll come to where you can actually check, you know, where, you know, or how to identify a predatory journal, how to avoid them. And I have a lot of that on my various research guides as well in the publishing one. Index in Scopus and Web of Science, which makes it more discoverable, particularly Scopus these days, because that's the one that feeds into the university rankings. So if your papers aren't discoverable by those, you know, it could be difficulty, I suppose, you know, that it's not going to feed into the college rankings, which would be quite important. So you might want to consider that. And also, you know, any journals in those have a kind of very kind of high quality ranking and measurable rankings, I should say, as well. You can go in and you can measure the impact of the journals. Open access, important as well. Are there open access options for the journal you publish in? So some journals will be purely open access. A lot of those ones that are on Scopus Web of Science tend to be what they call gold open access or hybrid open access. So gold open access is where it's completely open access and you pay, everybody pays to get the papers up there. Hybrid is some of it's behind a paywall and some of it's open access, again, depending on whether people pay article processing charges. But luckily, those new agreements cover a lot of that. So hopefully that would allow you to publish open access without a cost implication, which can be quite substantial sometimes, depending on the journal. When you publish, have a clear title match the abstract summary, keywords. And this is just about making your paper searchable. As you imagine, everything now is electronic, so you want people to be able to find your paper. So you want those nice, clear terms within your papers that people can find. Okay, rather than say overly complex titles that don't relate to the content or the keywords. Use your ORCID ID, make your work more visible, make it open access, and that can include data as well. That's a requirement now of a lot of funding, so you might want to come to the library and chat about your data management plan and how to make that available. And promote your research online, so things like Twitter or X, LinkedIn, Instagram, academic social networks can be used with caution. Of course, all these social media things come with a health warning. And like the likes of Twitter, I know some people are pulling away from it. So you might want to consider, are there other ones out there that you might want to get involved in? Maybe do something like create a blog, a personal website, promote your work that way, do guest blogs, blog from conferences, anything just to get your name and your work out there. And that'll all impact then on your readership and your citation rates. Target your audience, be selective what you put out there. So if you are using social media, think about, well, who do I want to connect into this and use their handles and tag them and all this kind of thing. Track the attention your work is getting and use Autometrics and refine how to use social media. So there are Autometrics tools, which I'm going to talk to about briefly in a second now, but you can track the attention your work gets. So who's downloading me, who's viewing me, who's tweeting me, all that kind of stuff can be tracked. And then you'll get a sense of who's following you, what platforms they're on. And maybe then when you are putting out your next piece of social media, focus on those platforms rather than everything. Okay, next one. The social media impact itself. So there seems to be a positive correlation with readership and citations. As you can imagine, the more people that read, the more citations you're going to pick up. It's an opportunity to push your research rather than waiting for others to find you. You know, you get out there and see who isn't following you, who has missed your work, how do I target those? Be consistent in your profile, whatever platform you use. So have, your nice professional profile that you use at all times. What are you going to achieve? What's your message? Eye-catching visuals, all that. Just be quite practical about it. Identify your audience, so their handles, their hashtags. If you want certain people to see it, certain news outlets, include their handles. And what platforms do they use? And then encourage them to react to your post. If possible, include the full text to your paper. Okay, very important. Obviously, people are aware of your work, they want to be able to read it. And unfortunately, the material behind paywalls, so just to watch out for that. And even if there is a copyright restriction, there could be a version of your paper you can put up, like it could be preprint, post-print, accepted version, that kind of thing. So there could be options there, and you can check all that with the library. We'll look at that for you. Speak and tweet at conferences, write a blog. Evaluate the impact of your social media campaign, okay, and change it if needed. So if something isn't working, don't be afraid to go back and change it. And then use Autometric tools to check the conversation around your work. Okay. Next one. So Autometrics, so I mentioned this a few times. So effectively what they're doing is, in the way that something like Web of Science and Scopus will track your citations, Autometrics capture the attention around your work. As I say, who's viewing you, who's downloading you, who's bookmarking you, what media outlets pick you up, all that kind of thing. Okay, that can be measured. And they do that by we give them sort of details of who is in our institution repository and who is on RIS. And once the full text of the paper is there, they'll actually track that paper. So they're not tracking you, they're tracking your papers. So as your papers are mentioned, they can track that on certain platforms and then tell you the attention they're getting. Okay. So next one. This is just an example of the Autometric Top 100, which you can have a look at if you get a chance. The interesting with these Autometrics, it's not just academic communities that are interested, it's also the wider public. And, independent researchers will be interested. So you'll notice like it's a lot of those kind of areas that cross over a bit. So you'll be a lot of interested in probably disability, autism, cancer, COVID when that was going on, those kind of areas probably diet, health, that kind of thing. People tend to be interested in that, so you get a lot of traction on that. But that's quite a nice little thing there. They stopped doing that top 100 now, but still you get a sense of the kind of areas that are popular with people. So next one. And to improve that score, what you do is just make sure your work is available open access. So you're going to put it in a repository. Make your research outputs available online as well. That could be your data. Blog about your work. Ask others to do it as well. Tweet. Online reference managers. So share your research to Mendeley. The huge readership of Mendeley. People will be viewing and downloading your papers in there. And make sure your researcher IDs are up to date as well. And keep your publications up to date on those. So then when people do find you, they know exactly what you published, they know what area you're in, and that's where your possible collaborations and citation options emerge. Okay, next one. And this is just the attention score. So you'll see this actually in a lot of the platforms. So you'll see it in Scopus, see it in library search when you're searching for papers, and those little colored rings on the donut, they designate attention from certain types of sources. Okay. And there's an algorithm that gives you an attention score, and they're weighted depending on what area it is. So they might, for example, weight a newspaper article more than they would a blog, that kind of idea. Okay, next one. So there's an example of what it might look like. There's a paper there, Regretting Motherhood in Germany, Feminism, Motherhood and Culture. I see with the left-hand side, they're getting just red and blue for that. So they're 4 news outlets were interested in that. And 14 Twitter users. And the citations, well, dimensions, that's just another citation to them. And just on the bottom, you can just see Mendeley with 15 people linking into that. So it gives you a nice overview of the attention you're getting. Actually, go with the next one. I think there's more detail. Okay, this is just Maynooth's profile. Okay, and currently we have a subscription to Automatic Explorer, which lasts until December. So if you're interested in that, I can talk to you about that again. But this is just all the research outputs from Maynooth. So it's got 90,000 mentions, 4,000 retention. It's giving you a link in there into social media, news and blogs, policy and patents, other sources and academic sources. And then it's going to give you a list down below of the top outputs. And you can see with that, it makes sense. I did the top one there is global climate change, Atlantic Ocean current circulation. Again, that's climate related, warming oceans. Another one on the Atlantic, SARS, sea levels. So you can see they're interested, and it also reflects, of course, Maynooth does an awful lot of work on that, around the ocean, climate change, warming oceans, energy, all that kind of thing. So, and they're also ones that are getting an awful lot of attention. So that'd be fabulous. If they're going for more funding, they can actually show the traction their papers are getting. Okay, next. And this is just an example in Scopus. They use a tool called PlumX, which tracks the metrics. And again, you can see over there, they're getting attention in Scopus, patents, policy citations. That's a nice one to be able to show kind of societal impact of papers. And then Mendeley captures as well are appearing on that. And again, for that, you just go into, there's a link there in Scopus when you find a paper, just click into metrics, and then it'll give you other metrics, and you'll find the PlumX bit. Okay, next one. So this is Automatic Explorer again. Okay, and that's again, it's all Maynooth as well, so keep going from that one. Sorry, next one, Heidi. Yeah, so this is just an example then of a particular paper that's looking very good. So you can see the kind of amount of attention this one is getting. Okay, and what you could do is you can go in and then analyze that. So you can see from that they've got 52 news outlets. That's great. So you could go in and look at those news outlets, see what papers are picking up my work, and the ones you consider the best ones. Then you could use that to promote your work. You're getting a lot of Twitter users. If there's policy papers in there, you could identify those and kind of use that as well as because that's a great bit of kudos. That you're being mentioned in maybe government policy papers. So you could use that. So again, there's just different ways of, and of course, you're also seeing from this what are the best places for me to target. And immediately I'm thinking from that, right, Twitter is good, and news outlets are good. Other ones not so good. So I could either decide, well, I actually want more interest in blogs and target those, or you could go with what is working at the moment and just try and bump that up a bit more as well. So the next time you release a paper, you might think, well, certain newspapers missed my work. I'm now going to target those and stick their handles in as well on a site. So next one, next slide. And this is some useful resources then. that'll help you with all this. I have a section in there on measuring research impact, and that would cover things like research profiles, scholarly profiles. Of one generally on scholarly communication you could look at. A section there, ORCID IDs, your online research identity. So there's a lot of different guides that will give you more details on that. So next slide. So I think that is it. Thank you very much. Any questions, thoughts, observations?